and I create this real energy in my head. And it was a really powerful tool. Say, Greg, no visualizing in January, February, March, because I get fit too quick because I was so like excited to be out there.
Hello and welcome everyone who's watching. This is another exciting episode of Mind of the Month, which is now Mind of the Week because we're coming in more frequently. And I'm excited to be here again. And this time I'm sharing time with Greg Bennett. Oh, I am so excited. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Julia, how you doing? It's been so long. It's so great to be chatting with you.
Oh my goodness, this is so exciting to see you and to have you here. And I am truly honored. I am so pleased to have you here. It's phenomenal. So for everyone who's watching, I bring to you stories and people and to inspire you. And it's basically people who I admire and who I adore for what they did and how they're living their life, and who I'm sure will bring lots of insights and stories to you, to the audience, to the listener, to the viewer, and hopefully inspire you to live a life even more powerful. And so, Greg, you're one of those people who, over all these years, 1995, when we met in Sydney, are truly an inspiration. And I know not only to me, to a whole load of other people as well. You are a triathlete, an elite triathlete. You have had many, many world titles under your belt. Is it under your belt? Is that what you say?
Yes. I think that's as far as we go.
On your trophy shelf behind you somewhere. And not only have you been an athlete, you are now also owning a consulting agency together with your wife, Laura. And the two of you call yourself Bennett Endurance, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So Laura and you have been named the fittest couple of the year, which, I mean, looks like this is incredible. Everyone else puts to shame with that. So everyone can go home. You are the fittest couple of the year.
No, not a lifetime ago.
It's still in there somewhere. It's still in there. So this is all phenomenal. And you two have been Olympic triathlon athletes. And you both came up at the Olympics fourth, which I'm very pleased about, so that you keep that equal, like that's fair.
Really relationship.
Very good for your relationship harmony, I'm very certain. And you now have children to look after. And so recently you started podcasting as well. And this is going through the roof, right? This is so incredibly successful. So I am just so excited to have you here. And we're going to talk about something which you have practiced a lot throughout your career. And it's going to be how powerful visualization is for peak performance and basically for your life. So Greg, thank you for being here.
What a lovely introduction. You should be my PR agency. You make me sound far bigger and better than I am, but I appreciate it very much. And I can't tell you how much I'm delighted to be on your show and get this chat. And it's like you said, it's 25 years ago since we met, and boy, time has flown and a lot has happened in that time, and so it's just phenomenal that we've come all the way back around, and you've got your amazing show, and I follow it on Instagram and the amazing people that you're working with. So to be on your show, I feel really honored. And, I've been enjoying this whole new world we're in with podcasting and these kind of chats you've got. Like you said, it's just so much fun, and more than happy to talk about visualizing. I love it. I think it's the future of not just the sport. I think it's the future of everything we want to accomplish in life. I think that it's so powerful that we're only just tapping into it right now. I kind of feel like as an athlete, we're optimizing our physical limits almost as much as we can. And I feel like this mental power, we're only just scratching the surface on it. And I think that's where the visualizing is just so powerful, in the way that it can affect our hormones if we really do a good job at it, and those hormones then can affect us physically. So the repercussions of it are just phenomenal, and excited to chat to you about it today for sure.
Oh wow, this is I mean, and I know we could talk about this for a long period of time, because this could literally be like the topic of a whole podcast series. But so we're going to get to grips of what it means to you and how you used it and how it has affected your life already. And to maybe wind back the time as well, how you like to do that in your podcast. When you just said 1995, when we spent some time in Sydney together, I just wanted to give a huge thank you to your parents right here, right now, because, oh my goodness, your parents then were the most generous people. They were hosting us. We were living in your space for a while. Can you remember that?
I do remember that.
This is
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, we were staying with Darren and others, and in their house, and then we were looking out for a new place for our own, and which was, I was working for Kookaburra and doing an internship for them, sponsoring agency, and before we could get them to get us a place where we could stay, Martin and I found shelter with you. And, this is just such a wonderful time to look back to. And so thank you again for that generosity, which you might not know has shaped us in a way that we now, ever since then, feel so open to other people coming to our place when they come and step by and visit. So you have made a tremendously big part of that. And I'm mentioning it because if only one knows what things might happen in the future, isn't it? Because when we're talking about visualization, we can look back at a time when we have memories of something. But when we set out to visualize something in the future, it starts here in the now. So we do something in the now, and that has an effect on the future. So visualizing something like, being generous and hosting people, that then draws things into your life. And so that's what we experienced. We wanted to be open to other people because we experienced that with you guys.
Yeah.
And so it happened then. People came our way and did internships with Martin in his company, and our home was open. And so in a way that's part of life. So tell me about visualization then. What does visualization mean to you? And as an athlete, what does it mean, and how did you use it for yourself?
And that's a really good question. So basically, like you said, we refer all the way back to the early 90s when I was kind of in my career. And I was having some success in the 90s and even early noughties. I think I won the World Series in 02 and 03, but I still wasn't winning a lot. I was on the podium a lot. I was known as Mr. Consistent. And that was great. And it was nice to have that kind of success and the pats on the back. But what really happened when I was about, how old was I? Probably 32, 33. I really started to make visualizing a practice, like make it an effort to do it. It wasn't, I think I always thought visualizing was something that would just come to you and then you'd play with it. But I actually set out to do it. And I changed my winning rate once I started visualizing from 2006 onwards. I had a winning rate of about 8 to 10%, which is good, but it's not a lot. 1 out of 10 races you get to win. It's not a lot. To closer to 1 in 2 races for the next 5-6 year block after I started visualizing. Now, it's not all visualizing. Obviously, I was doing solid training, and I was fit and strong and working on nutrition and sleep and had a good team around me and all of those things. But when I incorporated visualizing, that's when I really started to see these results change. And I look at visualizing in 2 ways. There's the physical visualizing when I'm out training, and then there's the static, and that could be I'm lying in bed or I'm getting a massage or whatever it is. And the physical training, the physical visualizing is basically where I would say something like, I decide a race either 6 months or a year or 2 years down the track. I know where that race was. I have an understanding of the conditions, the temperature, the winds, the rains, whatever it is. I'd have an idea of the course. I'd know the players, the certain competitors I was up against. And I'd have an idea of how that race was going to have to be won. So it was going to need an incredible swim with a powerful bike to break away off the front and then hold on the run, or it might be hang in there on the bike and then take off in the run. Whatever it was, I set out a couple of different formats of how I could possibly win that event that I was really focused on in the future. And then I would go down to a local trail, whatever workout I'm doing, or the track, and say I'm doing 10 by 1K efforts or 10 by 3-minute efforts on the trail. And I would, in warm up, I'd have this little commentator in my head, it'd be like, okay, and here they are, they're finishing off the bike, and there's a pack of 7, and Greg Bennett's in a good position, and, so-and-so and so-and-so, and I'd have all the names going. I'd know exactly who I'm going. And then I'd finish my warm up and I'd get ready to start the workout. And then I'd be like, okay, they're off the bike and away they go. And, and so-and-so surged to the front, and, and I'd create this real energy in my head. And it was a really powerful tool. And I'd go through the workout, and the commentator would be going. And finally, I'd always make sure I'd win. That was the whole point of it. and so I would do that. And I just kept rehearsing what I wanted to have happen. I kept doing it every time I do a workout. And I became very good at it. I became quite creative. And in fact, if you saw me out in the middle of a bush, in Noosa, Australia, or in Boulder, Colorado, you see my hands in the air, as I cross the line for the win. And then I look, did anybody see me? But it was so powerful that I could actually take myself right to that point. And what I loved about that visualizing, there were times that it actually happened almost exactly how I visualized in a race. And it was when that happened and you go, wow, I have looked at doing this so many times, and then it really happened. The exact players that I was up against, the competitors, they were same guys that I'd visualized, that same thing happened, and then I was able to make the win happen or whatever it was because I'd actually seen it. And it was a really powerful way of doing it. So that was the physical kind of visualizing that I did.
Amazing. That's awesome to hear that. I mean, you must have gone down to real great detail there, knowing everything, where everything is and what's happening around you, and really putting everything into your mind. And then would you talk about emotions as well? How much of an emotional charge did you feel when you visualized?
Well, that was it. I mean, I think the emotions of it all were really powerful. And like I talk about in my podcast, how I believe that through visualizing, we can affect our emotions quite dramatically. And when we affect our emotions, I really feel like we can affect us hormonally.
Yeah.
And then we're making a physical change. As soon as we're hitting those hormones, we're actually doing a physical change to the body.
Yeah.
And if I visualized 3 times a week a certain race at a certain workout for a year or 2 in front, well, now I visualized 150, 200 times exactly what I want to have. And the transformation of seeing it first, and the visualizing was so detailed. The temperature, the smells, the crowd, around the lake that are surrounding the lake, so I could get, used to the energy, the finishing line. Just all of those little details really, really matter. And for me, it was easier when I used a commentator and had the helicopter flying above and I could just, all of that energy, what I could muster and put that into a workout was really critical. It got to the point I became so good at visualizing. Laura, my wife, would say, Greg, no visualizing in January, February, March, because I get fit too quick because I was so excited to be out there.
Oh, cool. So, but you still needed the real experience, yeah?
I still needed the real experience. Don't get me wrong, sometimes the visualizing was almost better than the real experience. Not quite as painful.
You could only get the prize money and the real,
exactly.
figures in the real world. Okay.
Yeah, but then I also, like I mentioned, I also did a static visualizing, which was more if I'm lying in bed or on a massage table and I just go through the whole race, the swim, the bike, the run, and I close my eyes and just go through every detail from the warm up before the race. I'm going to wake up at 3 a.m. if it's a 7 a.m. start or whatever. I'm going to eat this, I'm going to do this. And I'd rehearse that in my mind, even the littlest things. And that didn't mean it was always perfect. And even visualized, maybe the race is going to be delayed, or I'd visualize every kind of, so I could adapt quicker. Because that adaptation was the other thing that I really wanted to make sure I was the best at adapting to whatever happened. The swim got cancelled, a storm hit, whatever it was, you could visualize those things. So it was never, visualizing for me was never about the perfect situation. It was identifying that a lot of things can happen and I've got to be able to adapt. So visualize as many situations as I could. And that's where I had to do it so often so I could be ready for anything. And it really was a powerful way of doing it. And my final visualizing before every race, I'd be lying in bed the night before the race and just close my eyes, and I'd take myself from, like I said, the morning I'm waking up to all the way to the finishing line of the race, and every step. And that would often take me 20 minutes to half an hour of a strong visualize, which, you know, once you go, but then as soon as I stop that visualizing, I go, okay, no more. And that's what I'd say to myself, no more. And then I could get a really peaceful sleep. I'd get rid of that anxiety because I'd already gone through every step. And that anxiousness that people get is more because they don't have control and they're fearful or whatever else. But I just figured if I could really just visualize everything that was going to happen, it really just calmed me the night before a race. And then that was when, you know, I could, you know, get up the next morning and let it happen. And it was far more relaxing for me to approach it that way.
Wow, this sounds so incredible and so fine-tuned and detailed. I'm loving it. So I've got two questions there. Where did your visualization finish? Was that at the finishing line, or was that?
No, always with an award speech.
Right. Or after a good recovery, or when did your visualization finish?
Yeah, no, it really was. I would finish with an acceptance speech or a post-race interview in my head. And I know this sounds it's almost uncomfortable to talk about a little bit because it was so in my head that, it was like my victory speech was a part of the whole process. And the victory speech was almost to recap, to summarize what I just visualized. You know, it was like, and look, there were some days where visualizing was really hard, and not hard. I don't mean hard because I couldn't visualize. It was hard physically. I was exhausted. You know, when you're stringing together weeks, months of 30 hours a week of training, and you're physically tired, and you're always on the knife's edge of being overtrained, but you're still trying to get what you can out of a workout. And that's where I would change the commentary in my head. And it's like I said, adapting to whatever was happening. And so I would adapt by saying, this has been the hardest bike ride in the fastest time trial that any of these athletes have ever done, and everybody's legs are smashed. So I'd start with everybody's legs being smashed. So even if my workout wasn't the times that maybe I was hoping for, maybe everything was a bit slower, well, so was everybody I was competing against in my head. And so I still could come out with a positive workout. And it was amazing how many times where I'd be like, the first few steps were brutal, but then I could actually turn it around with some really positive affirmations and visualizing that really helped. So it wasn't always perfect, and look, some people struggle with it. Like my wife, Laura, she really struggles with visualizing. And so what we would do is I would run next to her during her workouts, and I would be a commentator, and I'd commentate next to her. And, you know, it'd be, and Laura Bennett with 1,500 meters to go, stand up America, she's made her way into the finishing chute, and there's a Swiss girl, and I mentioned all these people, but Laura Bennett has kicked away, and she would just start flying, and I'd have this, you know, he's sprinting down to the finish. And so I understand that for some people, visualizing is going to be more work than others, because it is a creative gene that I think I've got maybe that little bit more, I live in my head a little bit more, but I don't know. I think Laura, maybe her German blood, she's very systematic.
To some degree, it could also be that, you know, we all learn differently, and we are maybe more visual, more auditive, more kinesthetic. So it could well be that we have a tendency to bring in that other element more. So if a visualization is what we want to do, then I said, you know, maybe there are elements where we, in words, can be more kinesthetic or more auditive, which, if people don't know what that means, is a visualization then could include even more words of, I'm feeling this, and I'm sensing that, and I am overly enjoying, like, put words in which are more felt than seen.
I like that. Yeah.
And for other people who are more auditive, I mean, I think 60 or 70% are mainly visual, but it's always good to include all three to make it all around. But if you're then hearing the audience and listening to the cheers, and so I think that's another element to hypen this even more up. But I'm super fascinated on how were you able to finish a visualization and then sleep? I mean, other people have difficulty to have all these images in their heads anyway, and you did that on purpose, and then you were able to close that movie and then
Mm.
sleep, because
Mm.
sleep is so important in your preparation and recovery as well.
Well, I think sleep the night before a race is one thing through experience. You know, obviously I got used to, I tell a lot of athletes, don't worry about the sleep the night before a race. If you stay up all night, it's not going to affect your race. And even if you don't sleep 2 nights before a race, I look at sleep always as a weekly total, and it tends to take the pressure and the anxiety of anybody with insomnia or sleep. I'm like, don't worry about nightly, look at week totals and see if you can kind of space it out, because we're all going to have nights where we're anxious about something, or, you know, I don't know about you, but when I was starting my podcast, it was like I was kind of nervous and excited, but there was this anxiousness that went about it, and it was like there were a couple of nights there where I didn't sleep well. I get very hot in bed these days, so I'm like, you know, I don't sleep as well as I used to. But then I'm like, so long as I can get a make-up sleep where I get an 8 to 9 hour, you know, decent one a couple of times a week, then I'm not going to stress about the nights where maybe I only got 3 to 5 hours of restless sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by doing that the night before a race, like you said, when I finished my visualizing, I could lie back and go, look, if I sleep, I sleep. And if I don't, I don't. But I've already visualized, so I'm not thinking. And any time it came into my head, anything about the race the next day, I'd just say no. I'd grab it as quick as I could and just say no. Mm-hmm. You can think about anything else you want, but you're not thinking about the race tomorrow. And I always found if you can grab those things as quick as you can, and it might take me 20 times. Oh, what about, did I pack my wetsuit right? No, I'm not doing it anymore. This is it. And so, okay, something else, no. And so it became a process. And a lot of that's confidence and experience over time, you know, and I think that's the other thing with visualizing. I think it does come deep within with that confidence. It's hard to visualize yourself winning if you don't have that self-belief. And it's hard to have that self-belief if you haven't done something in training to give yourself that self-belief. So it's kind of, they all work together, I think.
So would you say you have used visualization ever since then? And how did you think your other athletes, like the ones next to you who you visualized winning against, had they not done a good visualization because you were winning? Or how, like...
I know I've laughed about that with a few guys actually, and we were like, yeah, I'd visualized, you know, this and this, and a lot of them have been on my podcast, so I've had a bit of a look back and a laugh about what races and things happened. But I think, look, at the end of the day, I think it's an added tool to have in your toolbox, right? So I think it's one of those things in order to optimize who you are. It doesn't mean you're going to win every race. It doesn't mean you're going to have bliss for the rest of your life. There are still so many other things you need to have in your toolbox. You know, it's one thing to visualize the perfect outcome, but there's a lot of other things you've got to add to that. You know, you've got to be consistently working hard. You've got to be intent on your sleep, your nutrition, your general health, your physical training has to be the very best it can be, your tapering and resting. All of those things have to all combine. But to not have visualizing or using word affirmations, or if you've made expectations too high, so you're living in this kind of world of I'm never going to quite get to where I want, then I think you're not going to get there anyway. So visualizing is just one of those things that we can have in the toolbox. And I think probably the other thing that I did was remove, I mentioned expectations. I removed those expectations probably about 20 years ago in my career. So, and I remember it started with Laura coming up to me, and I'll never forget it. You know, I don't know if you remember, in Australia, we were live television, triathlon, and we were kind of big stars in Australia, you know, because it was all like, we were on TV and everything. And I was doing it for me, but then there was this feeling that I need to do it for the fans or family, and the bigger expectation than there needed to be. And I remember Laura saying to me once, Greg, nobody cares. And I know that sounds like, it was kind of, I was hurt at first. I'm like, what do you mean no one cares? You know, like, but what she meant by that is, look, I care about you right now, Juliet. We're talking to each other, and this is great. When I get home and I've got a 2-year-old that needs me, and I got a 4-month-old that needs to be held, and then I've got to cook dinner, and I've got to go to the shops, and I'm not going to be talking and thinking about you as much then, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. And it's the same with my sporting career. It was kind of like people care about maybe watching me race, and then it's over and they're doing their own thing and they don't care, you know? And so it comes from a good place. It's basically removing that expectation of doing it for others. I would do it for myself and myself only. So that was a huge thing for me that also helped along with the visualizing.
Well, on that note, I gotta tell a small story because removing expectations is a very important part as a life lesson. I remember 1995, we wanted to celebrate New Year's. And I don't know if you remember that, but as a German, we want to celebrate New Year's at 12 o'clock midnight. And Sydney has great fireworks, apparently. Until we wanted to go out with you and Darren and a few others to the harbor to see the fireworks, we were quite, just in our expectation that we're going to see them at midnight. Until you guys told us, no, 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 we're going to watch them at 9 o'clock. And we're like, what, 9 o'clock fireworks? Which, I mean, an ingenious idea to do that at 9 o'clock for family. We were like, no one in the world celebrates New Year's at 9 o'clock, but hey, oh, okay, let's see what happens. And I mean, literally, our expectations were gone out of the window. We watched the fireworks at 9 o'clock, and we were okay with that. But we were not okay with not even celebrating into 12 o'clock New Year's, because you guys already had to be in bed.
I know. I was every New Year's it comes around, we laugh because I think I've stayed up to midnight once in my life. So I've had, what am I? I'm 48, so I've had 47 New Year, 48, 47, and I never stay up. Look,
it's so fun.
I never.
Just on that note of expectations, life is easier when you don't have high expectations, but still high hopes for things. So
yeah, that's funny. That is really funny. And the other thing I just wanted to touch on, I know we talked about visualizing and expectations, but the other thing that I was very good at doing was not so much about being positive all the time, because that takes a lot of energy to be happy and positive all the time, and it's a lot of work. What I started to really focus on was just reducing the negative. So trying to come to a very quiet place in the mind. And I have a really good podcast on that with Mark Allen, who won the Hawaiian Ironman 6 times. And he put it really well. He said, look, Greg, my whole goal was just to quieten the mind. And I've always said just reduce the noise, but I like to use it in terms of just quietening it. And I think that combined with the visualizing was a really powerful way of doing it. And these days, quietening the mind is, I don't watch any more news. I don't need to know what's going on. It's enough. I mean, of the fear-based society that we live in. And that seems to be what journalists are really pumping out there, that affects you at a cellular level over and over again. And so both my wife and I, we really work hard at just reducing the noise. And that doesn't mean I'm positive and happy all the time. That'd be nice if I was, but that takes a lot of work. But at least I'm not going this far negative. And so if I can get to even, and then happiness seems to come a little bit easier and faster. So yeah, they're kind of the things that I did probably more in my 30s that affected my career outcome. I think lowering the expectation of others. I still had high expectations on myself, that I could manage that better. The visualizing a really positive outcome was huge. And like I said, both physically and static. And then just, quietening the noise, reducing that sound of all the negatives. So that might be just not having TV on and whatever it is, just trying to get rid of that negative stimulus. So when I started doing all of those things, that's when I really felt like my life started projecting in the way I wanted it to go.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible how, like, the peak performance on that extra level, you were just able to adjust that to a higher notch and find another gear in that. That's just great that you worked that out for yourself. Did you have an inspiration there by someone who you learned that from, or did you did you just look it up and practice?
No, definitely inspiration, and that has to be my wife, Laura. I think she has an innate, I don't know if it's in her DNA or whatever it is, but she has a way of seeing the world that is I think she's very confident and knows who she is deep down. And that took me longer. I don't know if it's a male thing or my own insecurities. It took me a lot longer to be comfortable with who I was. And look, I think some of those insecurities were quite good in the sense that they harnessed an ego and a bit of a chip on my shoulder that forced me. And I lived in this fear world that it got the most out of me because I was trying to prove to the world that I was something. So it's not all bad to have those insecurities and egos that I kind of had as a teenager and in my 20s. But I think once I got to the more neutral mindset, and having Laura as that kind of that coach in my corner, and it's like I call her my pocket psychologist, my pocket chiropractor. She was like she'd be working on my body and my mind at the same time, and having somebody in your corner like that. And a lot of my podcast is basically asking people who's in your corner, who's your team, because you can't do this stuff on your own. You need sounding boards. You need people that are experts at what they do, but they also want the best for you. And they're two very unique and different things. But if you have somebody that is great at their job and seriously wants the best for you, it's amazing how powerful that is. And so Laura was the number one person on my team for that. I never had to outsource for a psychologist or anything beyond that. And poor Laura's had to deal with a lot, so I'm quite a passionate, emotional athlete, which is a powerful tool, but I'm kind of that guy in the rest of my life too. And whereas Laura tends to be able to stay the course a little better than I do. So we work well together, that's for sure.
How cool. How cool. And could you briefly say how visualization has played a role in other areas of your life other than triathlon and peak performance?
Yeah, well, I think that's huge, right? Because I think visualizing is quite comfortable and almost expected that that's what athletes do. But when you look at it in the rest of your life, it's kind of like, well, how can I use it, and how can I be guiding myself to where I want to go? And I think even if I just look at this new business that we've started up with the consulting and the speaking, I mean, we were coaching, but I didn't like the idea of coaching. Coaching meant that I was holding the hand a little bit more than I wanted to. I want to work with people that want to take 100% responsibility for their own lives, because I think that's where, when you take full control of your life, that's where there's a real power in that. And so I want to be a consultant to others, so they can call up and set up an hour or two every month or whatever it is. And that, I like that, where I'm a part of somebody's life. I'm there if they need me, I'm a mentor if they need me, but I'm not every Sunday night writing out a training program or whatever it is. I like the idea of consulting. The speaking world, I haven't done a lot of. We have a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old, and I just want to stay close to them. So when when I'm visualizing my life and what I want to have, I can visualize it in different areas. So I have family life. I visualize I want to be a tremendous dad where I'm home and with the kids as much as possible. So it's this whole life by design kind of thing that people would like to throw around these days. That's my goal for this next 3 to 5 years, especially when the kids are really young. I want to be there as much as I can. If that can be the soccer dad, whatever it is, the soccer coach, all of those things, I want to be involved. Because otherwise I didn't need to have kids. I'm an old guy, I'm 48, but we have these young kids, and it's like, it was a really conscious decision to be a dad. And so it's been a visualized process of the kind of dad that I want to be. I have all these kind of roles that I want to be there with the kids, because I recognize that they're not always going to want to be around me either. So I'm taking advantage of getting this tremendous.
You'll have them for a while. You'll have them for a while.
Well, we got a little while, but I still want to optimize that time. And then on the business front, it's like, the podcast. I read a really good quote the other day for Chris Rock, the comedian Chris Rock, and he said, my car, I mean, it's probably not his car, but my car's always breaking down. And he said, I'm on the side of the highway and I'm always putting my thumb out, trying to get somebody to stop. And then, tell me, was this your quote? Maybe it was on your site that I even read it. Anyway, excuse me if it is, but I can't remember. Anyway, and then he said, and no one would ever stop. I'm putting my thumb out, no one's ever. And then I started pushing the car myself. And it's amazing when I was pushing my car, how much everybody else would stop and help me push the car. And the point of all of that is, when you start working on something and you're passionate about what you do, it's amazing how many other people want to jump on board and help you. And I know I'm a little off track in terms of visualizing, but in terms of where I want to go with the podcast, it's amazing how many people are jumping on board with what I've visualized and where I want to go, and the kind of person I am. And I'm loving the feedback, even if it's negative, because I'm trying to I want to be good at this, and I feel like I'm a 17-year-old triathlete that's just starting out a new career. And I'm just so excited every time I do one of them, and just putting myself out there and trying to do something great. It's amazing how many other people are jumping on board and slowly aiming towards getting to where that big goal that I have of really doing something special with this kind of show, whether it's YouTube or podcasting, whatever it is. But I'm kind of enjoying the process. But yeah, I do visualize what I want in life and where I want to be going a lot. But in doing so, I always try to stay as present as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a fine line of, that's why I like to visualize for a moment, put it there, and, you know, be futuristic for those moments, but I like to block it off. And then I like to be present right now, whether it be the kids, our conversation we're having right now, whatever it is, and stay present. And that's something I'm really working on as well, because I am a bit of a dreamer and looking down the road too far sometimes.
Sounds incredible. So what would be action steps for people watching? Because what they heard you say now is visualizing is good for that extra leveling up of what they want to achieve in their life in any area, if it's their sports, whatever sport it is really, if it is their family life, their personal life, their business life. So what would be, how can they start visualizing so that they feel, this is visualizing and not just daydreaming?
Well, I mean, you can start at daydreaming and then slowly hone it in. I think the big things is, firstly, ask yourself, do you know who you are? Are you very clear on what your strengths are? What are your talents? Because there's no point visualizing to something that it's really a bit too dreamy. I think trying to have a little bit of realism to it is quite important. So I think understanding who you are is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll change. You know, who you are today might be different for tomorrow. After our conversation, you and I are different people going forward tomorrow. I've learned some stuff, you've learned some stuff. Suddenly you're changing. But try and ask yourself, who am I? And what are my strengths? What are my talents? Then ask yourself, what do I want? What do I want? What am I passionate about? And try and align those two together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's one thing, I think we've had a kids generation where it's like, if you're passionate, go dream. If you can dream it, go get it. And it's like, well, no, whoa. Do you have some strength? Do you have some talent in that area? You know, and then when you can align those together, the next thing is take full responsibility for your life. So find the right people to help you, work on your sleep, work on you, and all those things. When you've done all of those things, so that's like, you've got that, you know who you are, you know what you want, and you're 100% responsibility for your life. Then you can start adding these mental strategies where it's like, okay, I know I want to be, I don't know, whatever it is. I want to be the greatest mum I can be. That's quite a broad goal. But any woman that's been able to have a baby is already a great mum. So you've got a talent and you've got strength. You can do it, right? Then it's how I'm passionate. Right, now I need to do everything I can to be the greatest mom. So is that outsourcing to grandparents for help? Is that learning and reading from books or whatever it is, or finding the right people? And then I kind of look at, okay, I could do a short-term visualizing. In a month's time, how do I want these kids to look? How do I want to be feeling? How much sleep do I need? And so you kind of just start little steps in understanding what you want it to look like, I think is really important. Now, when it comes to sport, like I said, I think sport is quite easy because there's a measured goalpost. There's an outcome that you can see, and you can, like I said, you can add all the elements, you know, the sight, the smells, the tastes, all of that you can bring in. For some of the more generalized visualizing, like when I talk about, I just want to be a great dad, some of that to me is more like maybe word affirmations. You know, it's like complain less, do more. That was one that I lived with before we had kids, because I found myself always complaining. I'm like, look, when you go to complain, just go do more and help out a little bit more. Don't complain. And so I think there's a bit of crossover when you talk about affirmations and word affirmations, and then
I like that.
And so I think for the general things, I think mantras and some word affirmations are really important.
Yeah, I totally agree to what you just said, because there is a fine line between that, isn't it? You can, in sports, you are more precise because you have more of a gauge of where you are with things. And then the other thing with the mantras and the affirmations, that's more general and can bring so much power in. You're kind of bringing that into your life because you are affirming it all the time.
Yeah, and then just measuring to yourself. I think we get caught up, especially with social media. It always looks like everybody else is doing everything way better than us. And I think that's where turning down the negative noise. I don't think social media is all bad. I think there's some interesting stuff on there, but sometimes if it's making you feel like, oh, I'm a struggling mum or dad, or I'm struggling to get my business going, or I'm a bit overweight, and everybody else looks like they're having a great time, they're working out, their kids are happy, and forget it. They're not. Like we all have insecurities. We're all just trying to be the best person we can be. And I think that's the more you can just be completely honest and authentic to yourself. It's amazing how uplifting that can just be. Where it's like, you know.
As much as I was trying to keep this to a shorter time, but I didn't.
Oh, sorry. That's my fault. I wrap it on a bit. I told you I talk a lot.
There's always two people there, isn't it? So, Greg, this has been such a pleasure to talk to you, and we could go on. I have got a few questions before we finish, and I actually asked friends if they have questions for you. So they're not related to visualizations, and what I think we do is, if people actually have more questions and want to ask you more about how you do stuff, I would put that underneath, and maybe they can reach out to me and we'll look through that. If there is something in there which they want to listen to, they can also listen to your podcast, where you speak a lot about mental strategies and mental strength and how to get to peak performance states. And so your podcast is called Be with Champions, and it's basically available on all channels. So just look out for that and subscribe. It's super entertaining and so informative. And just go out there, whoever is listening to this now, listen to Greg on his podcast. He's having incredible guests there. And he's taking his time to dive into topics deep. So it's fascinating to hear and listen. All right, so I have a question here for you, Greg. Okay. And it's from Neil, who is a very sporty triathlete and a fitness trainer. And he asks, any tips on how to crave hunger after a training session?
I think the best thing to do is to, firstly, you've got to reload. Well, that's a big question, actually, because it's so individualized. So it's like, hang on, let me get my filing system and my brain's like, boop, 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 boop.
Yes, he's also an Ironman athlete. And so he's basically long endurance racing and on high fitness level.
Well, it's funny. I've talked with many guests on the show that are Ironman athletes or working out these kind of huge volumes of working out. And I think number one thing is, don't over stress about how much you're eating post training. Eat as much as you can. You need to refuel. You've got to, the way I describe it, when you're training that hard, you've got this huge bonfire going inside you, and you've got to just stoke that fire. And to say, oh, you must eat carbohydrates or protein or fat or whatever to, whatever macronutrient we're talking about, and that'll help you, feel more satisfied. But I think firstly, just make sure you're getting something in as quick as you can. The other thing is, if you're really hungry post exercise, maybe you're not fueling enough pre and during. I don't think you should be feeling so hungry post exercise. I think, unless you're trying to do some kind of metabolism type thing for Ironman, where you're trying to fat metabolize and that kind of thing, and then you're getting really hungry. And if that's the case, I would suggest a well-balanced meal at the end of the day. I think you can start with your carbohydrates, get those in fairly quickly. That helps. And then I think if you can add your proteins and fats, that half hour later. But it really, I would have to, chat with Neil probably about going, what are you doing throughout the week and the months, and what event you're getting ready for, and is weight an issue for you? Are you trying to lean up? What is, so there's a lot of variables in that, but I would suggest making sure that during, you're consuming enough so you're not so hungry post. And then when it comes to refueling, just don't overstress it. Get in what you can.
Awesome, thank you. And then my friend Rachel is asking a question. She's also interested to hear from you. She says, how much of a factor does stress contribute to overtraining in both elite athletes and age groupers?
Stress, well, it's all stress. Everything's everything. I mean, stress is both good and bad. It's like we stress our bodies in order to get stronger. But I mean, in terms of that's such another really broad question that I think it's, when I talk about stress, I could look at a physical stress where I would sleep at an altitude tent to stress myself more in sleep and recovery process. My body has to get stronger. The whole point of stress is it's something that's hurting us, and then we're trying to become stronger from it, and we're trying to rebuild, whether that's mental, emotional, or physical. There's this whole rebounding. So, in things like being fearful of a race is not all bad. It's like it's the driving anxiety that get you going. It's like anxiety, I almost look as the fuel of fear, right? So if you can take anxiety on and go, use it as energy. Don't take a drug or whatever it is to flatten it. Use it to go do something. And then, so I don't know if I'm really answering Rachel's question, but I think the point is with stress is don't always look at it as a negative. Understand that the body can use it as fuel to get what you want out of it. But again, Rachel, you might have to be a bit more specific on maybe what you want, because the types of stress that we can get in our life, whether that be our gut system because we've eaten certain foods, whether that's stress, financial stresses and emotional and mental stresses, or family life, or the physical stresses that we're doing from overtraining or undertraining. It's kind of, they all intertwine. And it's kind of identifying those and being honest with yourself about what they are.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll leave it there because it's a broad question. So I've got two even more broader questions for you to finish on.
Go ahead.
I always finish with two questions, and they are, what does happiness mean to you?
Oh, that is a big one. I think happiness is what you get in moments in time when you, I think happiness, it's not all the time. It comes in moments, and that search for happiness is almost what, the world's become about. I think I'm happiest most when I've overcome a struggle. And so the joy of doing something, whether that's getting to the kids to sleep and suddenly you're lying in bed and you've got a 4-month-old and a 2-year-old and they're both asleep. There's this moment of joy. That's happiness. Or I don't know, like at the moment, if I want to swim underwater as far as I can and I come up and I take a deep breath and I've had a massive struggle and I just get to the top and there's this joy of, I did it and I swam this far underwater or whatever. I think happiness for me is not something that I'm living in. It's not a constant, but it's something that I get little moments. And like I said earlier in the episode was, I think the more I quieten the noise, it allows that happiness to pop in more often. If I was to lie into bed after putting the 4-month-old and 2-year-old down and I'm immediately turning on the news and I'm watching coronavirus everywhere, I'm like, I miss that moment of joy. And so I think it's quietening the noise so I open myself up to have happiness when it is around me, or joy, or whatever you want to call it. So
yeah. Nice. We'll take that. And what excites you most at the moment?
Talking to you.
Oh, we'll do that.
I think that's it. I think that's it. I think it is just being present with the people around me, and that's really it. And if anything, this corona thing told us is to be more present with the people around us. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, Greg, it has been such a real joy and a real privilege to talk to you. And so there could be so many more topics we could discuss from you as a person and your ventures, what you want to do, and together with Laura, what you are planning to do next and all these things. But for today, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. And now that I know that we have a house open in London or England, we're on our way. I can't wait. And it is a privilege, isn't it, to chat to all these people on these shows that we have. I'm much the same as you. It was a privilege to chat to you. I love conversation. And, my show on Be With Champions, I always just hang up and go, wow, it's just a real privilege just to chat, So thanks for having me on.
And whoever is having any questions, we put in all the links to your shows and to everything so they can find you and follow you and love it like you as well. So I'll see everyone soon in the next episode. Bye for now.